pretty drunk at the time. It wasn't much of a blessing for us, Charlie, was it? It was named the Frank Ellsworth Bridge, after a hometown hero who died in Vietnam, but the locals just called it the Sycamore Street Bridge. Sycamore Street was paved nice and smooth on both sides, but the bridge deck, 142 feet long, was steel grating that made a humming sound when cars went over it and a rumble when trucks used it, which they could do because the bridge was now rated at 60,000 pounds. Not big enough for a loaded semi, but long haulers never used Sycamore Street anyway. There was talk every year in the town council about paving the deck and adding at least one sidewalk, but every year it seemed like there were other places where the money was needed more urgently. I don't think a sidewalk would have saved my mother, but paving might have. There's no way to know, is there? That goddamn bridge. 3. We lived halfway up the long length of Sycamore Street Hill, about a quarter mile from the bridge. There was a little gas and convenience store on the other side called Zip Mart. It sold all the usual stuff, from motor oil to Wonder Bread to Little Debbie cakes, but it also sold fried chicken made by the proprietor, Mr. Eliadis, known to the neighborhood as Mr. Zippy. That chicken was exactly what the sign in the window said, the best in the land. I can still remember how tasty it was, but I never ate a single piece after my mom died. I would have gagged it up if I tried. One Saturday in November of 2003, the town council still discussing paving the bridge and still deciding it could wait another year, my mother told us she was going to walk down to the Zippy and get us fried chicken for dinner. My father and I were watching a college football game. "You should take the car," Dad said. "It's going to rain." "I need the exercise," Mom said, "but I'll wear my Little Red Riding Hood raincoat." And that's what she was wearing the last time I saw her. The hood wasn't up because it wasn't raining yet, so her hair was spilling over her shoulders. I was 7 years old and thought my mother had the world's most beautiful red hair. She saw me looking at her through the window and waved. I waved back, then turned my attention to the TV, where LSU was driving. I wish I had looked longer, but I don't blame myself. You never know where the trap doors are in your life, do you? It wasn't my fault, and it wasn't Dad's fault, although I know he blamed himself. Thought if only I'd gotten up off my dead ass and given her a ride to the damn store. It probably wasn't the fault of the man in the plumbing truck, either. The cop said he was sober, and he swore he was keeping to the speed limit, which was 25 in our residential zone. Dad said that even if that were true, the man must have taken his eyes off the road, if only for a few seconds. Dad was probably right about that. He was an insurance claims adjuster, and he told me once that the only pure accident he ever heard of was a man in Arizona who was killed when a meteor hit him in the head. "There's always someone at fault," Dad said, "which is not the same as blame." "Do you blame the man who hit Mom?" I asked. He thought about it, raised his glass to his lips, and drank. This was 6 or 8 months after Mom died, and he'd pretty much given up on beer. By then he was strictly a Gilbey's man. "I try not to, and mostly I can do that unless I wake up at 2 in the morning with nobody in the bed but me. Then I blame him." 4. Mom walked down the hill. There was a sign where the sidewalk ended. She walked past the sign and crossed the bridge. By then it was getting dark and starting to drizzle. She went into the store, and Irina Eliadis, of course known as Mrs. Zippy, told her more chicken was coming out in 3 minutes, 5 at the most. Somewhere on Pine Street, not far from our house, the plumber had just finished his last job of that Saturday and was putting his toolbox in the back of his panel van. The chicken came out, hot and crispy and golden. Mrs. Zippy boxed up an 8-piece and gave Mom an extra wing to eat on her walk home. Mom